Hi gents, and welcome to the second video on structuring your essay answers at A-level RE. This video is all about your AO2 answers. AO2 is the evaluation question. So what the examiner wants to see here is your ability to see different sides of an argument and weigh up which is correct and why. When you move on to AO2, it's important to shift your mindset. It's not just about explaining things. You want to show that you understand the argument and to present different sides of it. So today I'm going to talk you through how you might structure your AO2 answer. So the structure that we have taught you is this idea of pickle. You will see this on the screen. And that stands for point, information, quotation, and then either a limitation or an evaluation. So let me explain this. Your point, information, and quotation will be in every single paragraph. That is a simple structure for you to follow, like a checklist. You will choose whether to add a limitation or an evaluation based on whether it agrees with your overall argument. This will make sense as we go through this example essay. So the essay that we're going to look at is virtue ethics is not useful for making decisions. Evaluate. So first thing that you need to do is make sure you are so clear on what the question is asking for. So we know we're talking about virtue ethics. That means you don't need to talk about any other ethical theory. Virtue ethics is what you're talking about. And it's about whether it is useful or not for making decisions. Okay? So this is quite a simple question, but it's really important that you discuss what it's asking. In some of the essays I mark at A-level, people go off in other directions. Stay focused on the question. So the first thing that you have to do is have an introduction. What I would do in your introduction is firstly introduce what we're talking about. So here we have a sentence about virtue ethics. So it's concerned with the characteristics of an individual. Obviously, you can add more to that. This is a plan, so you get the idea. And then what you should do in your introduction is present your line of argument. And that's what I mean by an LOA. So, for example, I have decided that this essay will support the statement, arguing that the theory is outdated and that people need laws in order to function correctly. So what I've done is tell you exactly what I am going to argue. Remember, I've said lots. The examiner doesn't actually want a surprise. They don't want to get to the end of the essay and think, oh, that went in a different direction. I don't really know what their point is. From the introduction here, I can tell, okay, I know what this person thinks and I know what their main points are going to be. So they're going to argue that the theory is outdated and they're going to argue that people need laws. Okay? So straight away, we're starting to get an idea of your argument. So then we go on to paragraph 1. And as you can see, paragraph 1 agrees with your line of argument. So it's going to support the statement. So it's going to say, actually, virtue ethics is not useful. So look at what I do. My point is not just, one could argue that virtue ethics is not useful for making decisions. Okay? That's not the point. The point is due to the fact that it is outdated. So again, we're seeing this point is mentioned in my introduction. So I say I'm going to talk about how it's outdated in paragraph 1. That is what I do. Okay? Then my information, that is where I give specific detail. So it's outdated due to the fact that Aristotle lived and formed the theory in 384 to 322 BC. This means it's not applicable to situations such as modern ethical dilemmas, etc., etc. Okay, so that's specific information. Then I would add a quote somewhere in there. I haven't done this now for the sake of time, but you can add one. And then is where we get to the evaluation or the limitation. So for the points that agree with your line of argument, you're going to add an evaluation statement. So for example, I say this argument is strengthened by the ever-increasing rise in complex ethical issues such as euthanasia and embryo research. These cannot be simply dealt with by virtue ethics, that's meant to say, apologies, illustrating that it is not useful for today. So why do I not give a limitation here? Because this point agrees with my line of argument. I don't want to make my argument seem weak, so I say why it's a strong argument in that evaluation. Then we go on to paragraph 2. So paragraph 2 disagrees with my line of argument. And I say, some may suggest, however, that virtue ethics is useful, because it allows for individual moral judgment and is not rule focused. Okay, so that's my point against. Strong point. I give some information to explain what I mean. I also give a quotation. All these virtues constitute the middle, which is also the best. So this is going to be the same in every paragraph. Point, information, quotation. Great. But then this point agrees with my overall line of argument. So I want to give a limitation. And my limitation here could be, some may argue, however, that people actually can't deal with this amount of responsibility and need some deontological instructions, keywords, in order to function well in society. And you can even give this quote here in your limitation. And notice the end of this paragraph. Therefore, virtue ethics has good elements, but may not be reliable for decision making. So I'm showing the other side, but I'm not letting it defeat my line of argument. Then we go back to an agree paragraph. So virtue ethics is not useful as people require laws in order to function correctly. Look, this point we also mentioned in our introduction. Okay, it's all linking together. So this is my point. Then I give some information about how it's placed in too much trust in human beings. A link to Genesis 1 and say actually Christians might support this, but I also talk about how non-religious views could agree with this. Remember, virtue ethics is not a religious theory. You could give this quotation, all men are not angels, and then you're going to add evaluation rather than limitation. So this argument is strong as there's a large amount of support from historical examples, both religious and secular. So again, I'm talking about why this argument is strong because it agrees with my line of argument. I'm not going to give a weakness of it here because I want you to understand why I'm arguing this. It may be the case that that is all you have time for in terms of your main paragraphs, but if you have a time for a fourth paragraph, it's the same thing again. So it's going to disagree with your line of argument. And I'm saying actually virtue ethics is useful because it has a teleological focus. Virtue ethics is a clear purpose. You can go into eudaimonia, telos, keywords here. After you do the normal 3 things, you then will go to a limitation. So my limitation here is, while this is an admirable point, it's vague and difficult to understand in today's society. Some may argue that this is referring to life after death, while others argue that it is in this life. Either way, there's no confirmation of exactly what Aristotle is saying here. So again, I've shown a weakness to this argument. So you then have shown both sides of the argument, and then we come to the conclusion. You don't do a conclusion in the AO1 essay, but in your AO2 essay, the conclusion is so important because this is where you link everything together. So let me read this to you. Overall, it could be argued that virtue ethics has strengths that would allow it to be useful for decision making. I'm using the wording of the question here. Notice that. Such as flexibility and telos. We mentioned that in the essay. While saying this, however, it must be accepted that these ideas sound good theoretically, but in practice fail to be successful. In practice, virtue ethics is not applicable to today's society and does not give people enough guidance on how to live their life. In an ideal perfect world, virtue ethics could potentially work, but in our current world, it fails to provide satisfactory guidance and structure for individuals. Okay? I think you can make that conclusion better, but notice that I use the wording of the question, I refer back to what I've said, and I give an overall judgment and justify it. Okay? With this conclusion, the essay makes sense. If we didn't have this conclusion, you're not getting anywhere near the top band because we haven't actually justified our overall view. So as you can see, this is a slightly more complex structure than the AO1 structure, but when you get it, it works really well. So if I was you, when I'm writing an AO2 essay, I would write pickle at the top of my page and I would work out, okay, so these 3 are going in every single paragraph. But then I need to decide whether it's a limitation paragraph or an evaluation paragraph based on my line of argument. So that means before you write any AO2 essay, You need to work out what is your line of argument. Okay, so what are you going to argue? Are you going to argue for the statement or against the statement? Okay, so that is some advice for you in AO2 essays. You will now have a go at planning out a few of these using this structure. Okay, once you get this, your essays will stand out. Thank you for watching.